My uncle snapped. If you vanished tomorrow, nothing here would change. In the sunroom where the family demanded I sell my luxury garage to fund my cousin's vineyard. Aunt looked away, fiancé smirked. I nodded. That night, I left, leaving only one key. They found. When the call came from Aunt Vivian's assistant, I already knew something was off. She never called me directly anymore. It was always through someone else, like even the sound of my voice was beneath her station now. Sunday brunch. The usual spot. Her estate in Napa tucked between rows of old oaks and smug money. I arrived right on time, driving my rebuilt 1968 Jaguar E-Type. It turned heads like it always did. I parked away from the main entrance as usual to avoid the comments about showing off. Inside, the table was already set, white linens, crystal glasses, that whole polished silver routine they never dropped. Aunt Vivian was at the head as always. She nodded when she saw me but didn't smile. I noticed she never looked me in the eye. Not once. I sat. Coffee was poured, mimosas were passed around. They didn't even let me get one bite into my smoked salmon before my uncle cleared his throat. So, Thomas, he said, stirring his espresso like it was a moral judgment, we wanted to talk to you about the future. Of course. My cousin Brandon's name came up within 10 seconds. His vineyard project, the same one bleeding cash faster than it was growing grapes, needed a lifeline. A little help from family, my mother's sister cooed, patting my wrist like I was a 6-year-old clutching a lemonade stand fortune. Help meant money. Money meant me. I said no. Flat, simple, just like that. I'm not selling the garage. My cousin's fiancée, Madison, a walking trust fund in heels too high for vineyard dirt, scoffed. Come on, Thomas. It's just a car place. Brandon's work is legacy. Yours is temporary. I looked around. No one flinched. Not even my aunt. He's worked so hard, someone else added. We just need you to be practical. You mean sell my business? I asked. Well, yes, said my uncle. You've done well with it. But this is bigger. Brandon is the future of this family's name. I looked at Aunt Vivian again. She stared at her plate like it was speaking a language she didn't understand. No, I said. I've built something real. And I'm not handing it over just because Brandon's run out of people to charm. Then my uncle muttered it. Low, but not low enough. If you vanished tomorrow, nothing here would change. I froze. My fork hovered midair. No one said anything. No one corrected him. Madison smirked, took another sip of her mimosa and looked away like the verdict was in and I was guilty of existing. I looked at Aunt Vivian again. Still nothing. Just her fingers tapping the stem of her glass, waiting for it all to pass. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't family. Not really. Just a utility. They'd fed me, clothed me, raised me after the accident that took my parents. But love? That was conditional. And apparently the condition had expired. I didn't say goodbye. Not when I left the brunch, not when I passed through the wrought iron gates that had kept people like me in and people like Brandon safe. I just drove back to the guest cottage behind the estate, the same one I'd lived in for the last 7 years, and parked the Jag under the carport one last time. The air was still, like the place already knew I was leaving. Inside, everything looked the same. My boots by the door, tools on the workbench in the corner, the photo of my dad in his Navy uniform and Mom with her oil-streaked overalls leaning against his shoulder, back when grease on your hands meant something to this family. I didn't pack much. Just the duffel I used for racing weekends, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and the business records. Everything that mattered was at the garage anyway. But before I left, I pulled one thing off the shelf. A single car key. It belonged to the very first vehicle I ever restored from scratch, a beat-up '72 Mustang that had been rusted to hell and left for dead in someone's barn. I brought it back to life with my own hands. Spent 2 summers on it. Drove it straight to the garage, opening the day I hung the sign with my name on it. I held the key between my fingers for a second. Then I walked into the main house. Nobody was up. Aunt Vivian's staff kept their distance. They always did. I crossed the marble floor like a ghost, past family portraits I was never in. On the hall table beneath a vase of fresh lilies, I placed the key. Right beside it, a folded sheet of paper. It wasn't long. Just 4 sentences. I'm leaving. I won't be part of Brandon's vineyard bailout. The garage is mine, always was. And starting now, you'll have to figure things out without me. No signature. No drama. Just the truth. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, I was already halfway down the coast highway, windows down, duffel on the passenger seat, and nothing tying me back. The estate, the brunches, the fake smiles, they were all in the rearview mirror now. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for damn sure. They wouldn't find me holding the safety net they thought they were entitled to. Not anymore. Let Brandon figure out how to run a vineyard without the hidden scaffolding of my life propping him up. Let them all see what happens when the replaceable one walks away for good. The cabin wasn't much, but it was enough. Just a one-bedroom rental at the edge of a coastal town where the fog rolled in every morning like a clean slate. The kind of place where no one cared who you were, as long as you paid cash and didn't make a mess. I dropped my duffel by the door and set the business records on the table. The air smelled like cedar and sea salt. Quiet, for once. No wine glasses clinking. No Madison's voice slicing through the air like a blade. Just the low hum of the ocean beyond the hill. It was barely 7 a.m. the next morning when my phone lit up. 20 missed calls, 14 texts, and 3 voicemails from Aunt Vivian's assistant. At first, the messages were polite, concerned. "Thomas, please call us. Your aunt is worried." Then came the shift. "This isn't how we solve things in this family. Be reasonable. You're making this harder than it needs to be, right?" Because I was the problem now. I tossed the phone on the couch and let it buzz. By noon, the tone had changed again. Sharper. "You need to stop being selfish. You walked out on your responsibilities. Brandon's timeline is ruined now. You've set the whole family back." Family. Funny how that word only got used when they wanted something. Then came the real kicker, a screenshot sent by a friend from back home. Madison had posted a long, vague caption on Instagram. "It's heartbreaking when someone you trusted turns their back on family during a time of need. Loyalty isn't just a word, it's a choice. Some people never choose it." No names, but she didn't need to tag me. Everyone knew. Within minutes, the comments flooded in. Friends, family-adjacent people, business contacts. "So sorry you're dealing with that. You're right. Some people just don't get it. Let us know how we can support Brandon." Support him. Not a single person asked where I went, or why. But then, a different kind of message started rolling in. Old clients, car collectors, even a former apprentice. "Heard some crazy stuff. Just wanted to check in. Garage still running? I've got a Jag that needs your magic touch." They didn't ask for explanations. They just remembered who I was. And in that moment, something settled inside me. A calm kind of clarity. They didn't miss me. They missed the money, the backup plan, the fixer. Good. Let them miss that, because what came next they weren't going to see coming. Ms. Kwan didn't waste time on pleasantries. She was direct, professional, and sharp in a way that made you sit up straighter. I found her through a connection at the Classic Car Association. Someone who owed me a favor and said, "If anyone can protect your ass, it's her." We met at a small legal office downtown. Nothing flashy. She wore a gray blazer, no jewelry, no distractions. Just the quiet kind of power that didn't need announcement. "So," she said, flipping through the preliminary file I'd sent over, "you're telling me you've never formally merged your garage assets with any family interests?" "Never," I said. "It's fully independent. Always has been." She raised one eyebrow. "And yet there are financial records that suggest otherwise." I nodded. "Yeah, that's why I'm here." I pulled out a folder, handwritten notes, digital printouts, transaction summaries, decades of blurred lines. They'd always called them gifts, family support, temporary help, but the numbers told another story. "Take a look at these," I said, handing her a stack of printed bank logs. Over the years, I covered fees for Brandon's land permits, covered interest payments on a private loan for the winery expansion. One of them lists my garage address as collateral, without my signature. She sifted through the pages like a surgeon opening up a chest cavity. "These look like loan agreements masked as casual transfers. No formal documentation, no disclosures, but enough of a paper trail to suggest intent." "Exactly." I pointed to another folder. "That's the deed to the garage, registered in my name. I had it reviewed last year just in case. Clean title, no liens. But if you look at this," I handed her another page, "you'll see a lien placed on Brandon's winery 3 months ago. The collateral listed, shared family property, as verbally agreed. He even listed me as a silent guarantor." Ms. Kwan let out a low whistle. "Do you have this in writing?" "Better," I said. "It's in a text. Brandon messaged me about covering him one last time, said he'd clear it as soon as the next round of investors came in. I never responded, but he moved forward anyway." "Damn," she muttered, mostly to herself. "This is straight-up exploitation." I nodded. "I always thought I was helping. You know, after my parents died, Aunt Vivian took me in. I figured I owed them something." Ms. Kwan leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "What you owe them is nothing. What they've done is manipulate you under the banner of family. This isn't generosity. It's abuse of access. She started making notes. We're going to establish a legal perimeter. Immediate cease and desist for any financial claims against your business. We'll file documentation with the county, protect the title, alert the credit agencies. And if we find proof that they leveraged your assets fraudulently. She paused, then looked up at me. We sue. For the first time in weeks, I actually breathed. Not because it was over, but because now I was no longer playing defense. It started with a Facebook post. Madison, naturally. A carefully crafted open letter dripping with performative heartbreak. Sometimes the people you think are your foundation end up being the first to walk away when it matters most. Loyalty is a two-way street. Brandon deserved better. No names, of course. But she didn't have to. Everyone in our circle knew who she was talking about. The comments rolled in fast, sympathetic hearts, vague, "you're so strong" messages, and one particularly slimy remark from a local vendor. Sad to see family get twisted over money. Hope Brandon's project pulls through anyway. I didn't comment, didn't message. I just watched from the quiet of my cabin as the public image they'd built of unity, legacy, and wine-soaked dreams started to wobble. Within days, 2 local business partners pulled out of pending contracts with my garage. One cited optics. The other blamed unresolved family legal matters. Both thanked me for my time. It stung more than I thought it would. But then the messages started arriving from elsewhere. Old clients. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Heard you got dragged into some vineyard drama. If you're still taking projects, I've got a 911 that needs a second life. Saw the garbage they posted. Just wanted you to know some of us see through it. I answered everyone. Professional, polite, but I kept my personal feelings locked down. Because underneath the quiet support and the minor business hiccups, something much darker came to light. It was late, around 1 a.m., when I got the email. Subject line, urgent review, property tied to garage. Attached was a document flagged by Ms. Kwan's team. A scanned agreement I had never signed. A land deal dated 2 years ago. The parcel was listed under the family estate's holdings, supposedly earmarked for garage expansion, a promise Aunt Vivian had made to me once over wine and veiled apologies. But the paperwork showed something else. Brandon had used that same land, co-signed under my name, as collateral to secure a secondary loan for the vineyard. A quiet one. A desperate one. The kind that doesn't go through traditional banks. And it listed my garage's operating license as a guarantor asset. I felt my stomach drop. I'd been used, not just as a backup plan, but as a shield. They'd mortgaged my future without a single word. I forwarded everything to Ms. Kwan. Within 10 minutes, she replied, "This is actionable. You were defrauded. They committed financial misrepresentation and used your business to prop up a failing venture without consent. It's not just unethical, it's illegal." I stared at the screen. The shock wasn't loud. It was quiet. Hollow. For years, I thought I was being a good son. A dependable cousin. A loyal nephew. But this wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was sabotage. They hadn't just written me off. They tried to erase me while building their dreams on my name, my work, my blood and sweat. And now they were spinning the story like I was the one who walked away. They had no idea what was coming. Because next time I wouldn't be sending quiet messages. I'd be serving papers. The meeting was set for Tuesday afternoon. Aunt Vivian's assistant sent the invite like it was a corporate merger, complete with an address, time, and dress code suggestion. Smart casual. The family will be present. The family. I wore dark jeans, a button-up, and my old leather boots, the same pair I'd worn the day I opened my garage. Let them say something. Miss Kwan met me outside the estate's private conference room, a slim portfolio tucked under her arm. "You ready?" she asked, calm as ever. I nodded. "Let's end this." Inside, the air was thick with forced civility. The long polished table was surrounded by familiar faces, Aunt Vivian at the head, eyes cold but composed. Uncle Henry beside her, already red in the face. Madison wore black like she was dressing for a funeral, mine, probably. And Brandon? Still missing. Like always when it mattered. In his place sat a polished estate lawyer. Young, crisp suit, too smooth by half. "Thomas," he greeted me with a rehearsed smile. "We appreciate you agreeing to speak. There's been some misunderstanding." "MS." Kwan sat next to me and flipped open the folder. "No misunderstandings," she said flatly. "Just fraud." That shut him up. Uncle Henry cleared his throat. "We're here to ask you to reconsider. The vineyard is part of this family's future. Brandon has worked tirelessly. With my assets, I cut in." He paused, eyes narrowing. Aunt Vivian finally spoke. "You grew up here, Thomas. We raised you as our own. There is a shared legacy in that. Emotional equity." Ms. Kwan raised an eyebrow. "Is that your legal argument? Emotional equity?" The lawyer stepped in. "Thomas, surely you can see the value in supporting your family. You've benefited from their generosity, housing, mentorship, emotional support. Do you want to talk numbers?" Ms. Kwan asked, already pulling a sheet from the folder. She slid it across the table. This is a breakdown of every financial transaction between Thomas and your family over the last 10 years. You'll notice the flow is almost entirely one-directional. She handed out additional pages. Here are emails referencing business deals Thomas was never part of yet named in. Here's a lien Brandon took out using Thomas's garage registration as a guarantee. Here's the deed to the garage showing sole ownership. And here, she slid one final document forward, is the loan agreement Brandon signed using falsified co-ownership language to secure a private credit line. That's fraud. And we're prepared to pursue charges. The table went silent. My uncle's hands balled into fists. Madison's eyes darted across the documents, then to Vivian, who still hadn't looked at me. You always thought you were better than us, my uncle growled. Ever since you got that damn garage. This is all just a power play. I stared at him. No. This is me putting up a wall for the first time in my life. You didn't just take my money. You took my silence, my loyalty, and bet the whole family on it. The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should pause and reconvene. We're not pausing, Ms. Kwan said. This meeting is now a formal notice of non-cooperation. From this point forward, Thomas will not engage in any financial or business relationship with anyone at this table. All transactions are to be reviewed. All collateral removed. Madison stood up abruptly. You can't do this. I already did, I said. Aunt Vivian finally looked at me, but there was no apology there. Just the quiet realization that she no longer had a grip on the reins, and that this time I wasn't bending. I was building something stronger. Without them, we scheduled the follow-up meeting for the following week, but this time it wasn't in their world. No estate, no brunch table, no manicured conference room with heirloom chandeliers and decanted wine. This meeting happened on neutral ground, Ms. Kwan's office, downtown, plain white walls, and 2 pitchers of water. No performance. I came with one folder. Not thick, not flashy, but it carried the final nail. They came dressed like this was salvageable. Brandon showed up this time finally. Hair neatly parted, wine country chic blazer with suede elbow patches. His smile was smug, a little too practiced. Madison sat beside him, eyes hard. Uncle Henry kept tapping his foot. Aunt Vivian wore a subtle pearl pin I recognized from my mother's funeral. I almost laughed. They still thought this was about money. Miss Kwan gave me the nod. I opened the folder, pulled out a single document, and slid it across the table. Brandon picked it up. What's this? Public record, I said. Filed 2 years ago. You remember that land deal? The one you told me was for expanding my garage lot. He looked up, eyes narrowing. Turns out, I continued, you used that parcel to collateralize another private loan for the vineyard. And to secure that loan, you listed me as co-signer. That's not possible, he said quickly. I never. It's right there, Ms. Kwan said, pulling out her copy. Filed under Napa County Property Office. You used Thomas's EIN number, falsely labeled the garage as a shared venture, and pledged its future value to back your expansion. She dropped another sheet. This is a tax form. It shows the increase in your declared assets the following quarter, lined up exactly with the timeline of that loan. Every time the vineyard posted a gain, it tracked back to Thomas's name. Quiet, clean, buried in financial jargon. Madison leaned forward. Okay, wait, so you're saying this was fraud? I'm saying this was theft, Ms. Kwan replied. And we can prove it. I kept my eyes on Aunt Vivian. Her hands had tightened into knots on her lap. You told me it was for the garage, I said. You looked me in the eye. Vivian didn't answer. Brandon scoffed. You're blowing this out of proportion. We're family. I didn't think you'd care. It's not like you were using the land. You didn't think I'd care? I repeated, slow and quiet. You didn't think I'd care that you mortgaged my business, my future, behind my back? He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Every uptick your vineyard had for the last 3 years? Every bottle you sold at a profit? Every investor you pitched to with fake numbers? You were standing on my shoulders. I turned to Vivian. You didn't just let it happen. You orchestrated it. She flinched. For the first time in years, she looked shaken. You didn't just take my money, I said. You tried to rewrite my future without my permission. You used my dead parents' absence as a blank check. You took me in, not out of love, but out of calculation. Ms. Kwan leaned in. Our next steps are clear. We'll be filing formal complaints with the Napa County Financial Crimes Unit and the IRS. All liens tied to Thomas's assets will be contested and publicized. And if you attempt retaliation, we'll go to civil court. Their lawyer, silent until now, cleared his throat, folded his notes, and stood up. We'll need to review the situation further. Which was code for, you just lost. Uncle Henry muttered something under his breath. Madison stared at the wall like it had betrayed her. Brandon stood frozen, mouth half open like he was still trying to charm his way out. And Aunt Vivian. She finally looked at me, not with anger, but with something worse. Recognition. She knew she'd lost me for good. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was peace. No more early morning emails from Brandon asking for bridge funding. No more veiled brunch invitations or surprise drop-ins from Aunt Vivian's assistant. No more feeling like I owed them for a roof over my head when I was 16. They stopped reaching out. Or maybe they finally understood I wouldn't answer. The vineyard shut down within 2 months. Turns out once their financial scaffolding disappeared, so did the investors. The property went into foreclosure. Rumor was they tried to sell the estate to cover the debt, but even they got tied up in legal hell. I didn't gloat, not out loud, but I'll admit watching that for sale sign go up outside their perfect little compound felt like closure. I poured everything into the garage, not out of revenge, not anymore, just because it was mine. And finally, I was building it for me. I upgraded the workspace, installed new lifts, improved the lighting, expanded the bays, took on 2 apprentices, kids who reminded me of who I was at 20, hands scraped raw but eager to learn. One of them, Caleb, barely said a word when I first hired him. Over the months, he opened up. Smart kid, quick hands, a little rough around the edges, but damn, he cared. I started letting him handle rebuilds on his own. Now he calls me boss half the time and brother the other. He's like the cousin I never got. Ms. Kwan stayed involved, not just legally. She started dropping by the shop more often than necessary. At first, it was just to check paperwork, then coffee, then lunch. Eventually, she started asking questions about engines. Turns out she has a soft spot for vintage Porsches. Who knew? One evening, after we closed up, she leaned against the hood of a restored '68 Camaro and said, "You ever think about starting your own collection?" I shrugged. Always figured I was too busy fixing other people's. She smiled. Time to change that. So I did. Started small. Bought back the old Mustang I first rebuilt. The owner was happy to let it go, said it felt like it belonged to me anyway. Funny how things come full circle. There's still fallout. Some friends never reached out again. Others sent awkward thinking of you texts and then disappeared. A few, though, stuck around. They didn't need me to explain. They just showed up with a 6-pack, a handshake, or a busted carburetor that needed love. Those are the people I keep now. My life's not bigger than before. It's just mine. No one's waiting for a check. No one's pretending loyalty. And every time I hand a freshly restored classic over to a new owner, I remember why I started this in the first place. Not to save a family name, but to build something real with grease-stained hands and nothing to prove. Finally, I'm not the fixer. I'm the architect of my own damn piece.